Hello, and thank you for attending this presentation today. I am particularly grateful for the University of Scranton and the All One Foundation for granting me this platform to talk about something that is very important, and that is how to provide a safe and supportive learning environment for children. My name is Dana Gadaire. I'm a visiting professor in the Department of Counseling and Human Services at the University of Scranton. And my clinical work focuses on behavioral assessment and treatment of children with special needs, including autism spectrum disorder, anxiety, and ADHD. And one of my favorite professional activities involves consulting with schools to build systems that promote positive social interactions and, appropriately, given this presentation, minimize bullying. My objectives for this presentation are to define bullying and its fallout in schools for bullies, victims, and bystanders, as well as teachers, to help participants identify bullying and give them some concrete suggestions for promoting resilience, preventing bullying, and responding effectively when bullying does occur. So, what is bullying? Well, according to Dan Ulwius, a prominent researcher who has dedicated his career to addressing bullying in schools, bullying is poison. And it doesn't just poison the children who are directly involved, it poisons the entire community. It contributes to a negative school climate and reduces teachers' enjoyment and abilities to do their jobs. Bullying is unwanted, aggressive behavior among school-age children. Although I'm sure we can all identify some examples involving adults who should also know better. It involves a real and perceived power imbalance and repetition. It can include physical aggression, verbal aggression, social aggression, or relational bullying, as it's commonly referred to, and increasingly it includes cyber aggression. It's also important to define what bullying is not. Bullying is not conflict. Conflict is a normal and often a very healthy part of human experience and child development. Children do need to learn how to manage conflict within themselves, within their families, and in their social environments. But what makes bullying different is that imbalance of power. It's the imbalance of power that makes typical problem solving completely ineffective and often harmful. Also, it's not about social skills. It's not a matter of turn-taking or compromising on the rules of a game. Bullying is, first and foremost, a matter of rights. Children have the right to not experience aggression from those who hold higher levels of power than they do. And what I mean by power is not that teachers or administrators are bullying kids, not usually. Power can be social power. It can be unique to a setting. For example, the captain of a soccer team has power. The girl with 500 Instagram followers has power, whether they know it or not. And sometimes two kids can even start out on equal footing, but through repeated teasing and upsetting of one by the other, that one comes to have more power. So here are some examples of each of the different types of bullying. We're usually pretty good at identifying some of these, but not so much when it comes to others. For example, verbal bullying includes name calling, unwanted joking or teasing, and doing things to intentionally annoy others. Social or relational bullying refers to all those insidious behaviors that children do to get one another into trouble, to exclude, or to get others to avoid a person or think less of them. Spreading rumors, or getting others to behave coercively towards someone. Physical bullying is often what we think about in terms of aggression and property destruction, but it also can include sexual touching and physical teasing. And then cyberbullying typically involves some form of verbal or social aggression that occurs online or via text. Some of these forms are more common at different developmental periods. For example, in the early elementary years, children tend to engage in pretty straightforward forms of bullying. They threaten, they tease, they hit, push, bite, and so forth. But later on, they tend to get a bit more sophisticated in their methods. They may pressure one another to engage in unhealthy behaviors or behaviors that get them into trouble. they spread rumors, and the onset of puberty brings on a whole host of new opportunities for making one another's lives completely miserable. Have you ever thought, for example, that positive comments, particularly about one's looks or physical fitness, in excess might be perceived as bullying? If they're unwanted and the individual on the receiving end feels powerless to stop them, that is no less bullying than being shoved into a locker. Now, a quick note on cyberbullying. This form of bullying is particularly insidious because it cannot be escaped. It includes direct communication over the web or text, but it also includes making fake websites, profiles, and spreading rumors about another individual. For example, I've recently seen college students sharing doctored images of one another engaging in what would be considered risky social behaviors with respect to COVID, with the aim of getting them in trouble with the university. Cyberbullying can be 24/7, and it reaches a kid even when he or she is alone. It can happen any time of the day or night. And cyberbullying messages and images can be posted anonymously and distributed quickly to a very wide audience. It can be really difficult and sometimes impossible to trace the source, which often emboldens bullies. Also, deleting inappropriate or harassing messages, texts, and pictures is extremely difficult, particularly after they've been posted or sent across wide audiences. Unfortunately, the reality is that over 50% of children report they've been bullied online, and a similar number report that they've actually engaged in cyberbullying at some point in their school career. And these are kids who are willing to admit to having engaged in these behaviors. So how common is the overall problem of bullying? Well, nearly 2/3 of students report that they've been bullied at some point in their school careers, about 1/3 in the past year. And about 1/4 of students report that they've been bullied at least once a week. 68% of females aged 14 to 18 years report being subjected to some form of sexual harassment. And children who are overweight or children who are LGBTQ are at much higher risk of being bullied than other children. Certainly, children with disabilities are at far greater risk of being bullied. And what might surprise you is that they're at greater risk of bullying others as well. Often inadvertently, but that may not be relevant if your child crosses the line enough times or in the wrong ways. Children who are bullied by their peers are at increased risk of mental health problems, including depression, anxiety, and psychotic symptoms, particularly paranoia. They're at increased risk of suicide, both attempts and completions. And it's been suggested that over half of completed suicides among children under the age of 18 are directly related to bullying. Children who are bullied tend to have poor school attendance. They're at increased risk of substance abuse and of future antisocial and violent behavior. And they're also at increased risk of bullying others, which is what we'll talk about in a few moments. We're now starting to understand that being bullied may actually cause physiological changes in our brains and our ability to respond to stress, similar to the effects of severe and chronic trauma, and that these effects may last decades after the bullying experiences end. For example, systemic inflammation in the body is a consequence of chronic stress, and it's indicated by a substance called C-reactive protein. High C-reactive protein levels increase the risk of cardiovascular diseases, metabolic disorders, and mental health problems such as depression. Importantly, blood tests show that these C-reactive protein levels in the blood of children who are bullied are directly related to the frequency and severity of that bullying. Also, chronically feeling threatened by one's peers may affect how children appraise situations in the future. For example, being hypervigilant to hostile or ambiguous cues from others. In other words, another individual might engage in a behavior that isn't necessarily positive or negative, but a child who has an extensive history of being bullied will perceive it as being hostile. Now, some researchers suggest that it's not bullying per se that results in all of these negative outcomes, that children who are anxious or socially awkward are also more likely to have poor mental health outcomes. And that may be true. However, recent research looking at twins who are bullied and twins who are not, or who are bullied less than their counterpart, indicates that there is a direct relationship between the frequency and the severity of bullying and problems related to anxiety, depression, psychosis, and suicidal thinking, and that these links can last 2 to 5 years after the bullying stops. So being bullied by peers is extremely common, more common than abuse by caregivers, in fact, and it has lasting effects on physical and mental health. People sometimes think that these are mutually exclusive, as if frequency of bullying interactions somehow negates the trauma that it evidences for individual students. But what we do know is that, yes, bullying happens extensively in schools and outside of schools, and it's extremely harmful to those who are bullied. But healthcare professionals rarely ask about children's exposure to abusive social interactions with peers. It's certainly not given the same level of consideration as child abuse or other forms of trauma that are, of course, critically important, but far less pervasive. Now, I do want to make a quick diversion here to specify some terms, because we've seen an increased interest, appropriately and fortunately, in harassment. And in recent years, we have been much more responsive to concerns and reports of harassment, both in children and in adults. But this hasn't necessarily translated to more responsiveness toward our traditional, good old-fashioned bullying. So what makes harassment different? If you look at the definitions, they're largely the same. Both involve unwanted, usually repeated interactions that are harmful and involve an imbalance of power. But harassment often presumes some characteristic of the victim that is outside of their control. Individuals are harassed on account of their sex, their sexual orientation, their religion, and so forth. And certainly disability is included in this characterization. So if an individual is being targeted on account of their disability, they're not being bullied, they're being harassed. Now, why does this matter? Well, because we have legal protections against harassment. We take it more seriously. The National Convention on the Rights of the Child explicitly states that children are to be protected from harassment, and it is the responsibility of government to protect them. Based on Title IX and Title XII of the Civil Rights Act, schools can be prosecuted for failing to protect children from harassment. Now, I want to make it very clear that I am not suggesting you call your lawyer and sue your local school. What I am saying is that if children with disabilities are being targeted and it's systematic abuse, it's criminal and it needs to be called that. And this applies to physical bullying, to verbal bullying, to sexual bullying against both males and females, and to cyberbullying. This is a list of some of the cases that have been, in which schools have been prosecuted successfully for failing to protect children. So harassment is a very powerful term that can and should be used when bullying is directly linked to disability status. But as we will discuss in depth, sometimes it's not so clear. The link between bullying behavior and an individual's disability may not be straightforward. Bullies are often creative and they're frequently savvy enough not to use such direct tactics. So for the purposes of this presentation, I'll continue to use the term bullying. And I want you to think about, for just a moment, what a bully is. What does a bully mean to you? And what do you envision when you think about a bully? Many of us think of someone that looks kind of like this. Farkas from A Christmas Story, or Biff from Back to the Future, right? Or these lovely ladies that resonate with so many of us. I know I'm dating myself right now, but I've tried to figure out who the bully is among the Kardashian sisters. And for the life of me, I cannot figure out who's bullying whom in what situations. So that will feed into some of my later points. So we're thinking about bullies, and we've heard that bullies often engage in abusive behavior because they don't know any better. They have low self-esteem themselves and poor social skills. Well, that's not really what the research suggests. Actually, bullies are often doing just fine. They tend to be popular, funny, socially advantaged, and that's their power. But pure bullies aren't the only ones who bully others. All kids have the potential to bully others. 25% of kids admit to having bullied others. So imagine a school where a quarter of the kids act like Farkas or Biff. It's pretty frightening, but that's not the case. They actually are much more likely to be the funny kids who their peers actually sometimes enjoy. Teasing can be funny when it's directed at someone that isn't you. But in reality, bullies are these kids. They are your typical rebellious, unamused teenagers. They're the cool kids, the ones that teachers and other parents often like. And oftentimes, kids who are bullied end up becoming bullies. These are a different group, not socially powerful necessarily. They may lack social skills and bully because it's what they've seen and been victims of, but they learn that to survive in school, you have to be mean. And herein lies the difficulty in addressing bullying from a systemic perspective. Kids play many roles, and it's rarely straightforward. In addition to pure bullies, there are the kids who are bullied, some with significant risk factors, and some that just find themselves on the wrong side of a clique war, if you will. Even if a child is not directly involved in bullying, they may be contributing to or even reinforcing the behavior by laughing and playing off of another child who's teasing. There are kids who assist. These children may not start the bullying or lead in the bullying behavior, but they serve as an assistant to children who are bullying. They encourage the bullying behavior and occasionally join in. Then there are kids who reinforce. They give the bully an audience. They laugh, they provide support to children who engage in bullying. They may not directly take part, but they encourage it. There are outsiders. These children remain separate from the bullying situation, and they don't necessarily reinforce the bullying behavior or defend the child being bullied. Some may watch what's going on and don't provide feedback about the situation to show that they're on anyone's side. But even so, they're providing an audience, which still encourages the bullying behavior. Some of these kids may very much want to help. They just don't know how. And then there are the kids who defend. These are the kids who actively comfort the child being bullied and may come to their defense, trying to stand up to the bully when bullying is occurring. However, this can be a really dangerous position in itself, and it can lead to retaliation from the bully. Recent research suggests that bystanders, these outsiders as well as the assistants and reinforcers, may have more to do with promoting and sustaining bullying than we ever imagined. And these, from a systemic perspective, are a prime target for prevention. Recent research has also focused on another twist in our understanding of bullying, and that is the fact that most individuals who experience bullying are not pure bullies or victims. They're both. Depending on the situation and where they fall on the social ladder relative to their peers, they may bully children who are below them on the social ladder, and they may be bullied by children who are above them on the social ladder. So the kids in the middle are really a prime target because they may be playing multiple roles. And children with disabilities, particularly behavioral and emotional disabilities, are especially vulnerable to falling into this pattern. For example, here's a 12-year-old female who is physically mature for her age. On several occasions, imagine that her classmates have reported that she hit them. Is she the bully? Well, what if others have been making fun of her physical development for months, saying she's overweight in not as nice terms, and they are the ones in the positions of power? She's both victimized and lashing out in a manner that looks very much like bullying. Now, what if I also tell you that one of those who called her fat is diagnosed with autism and doesn't understand the social implications of this term? It can get really complicated really quickly. So what are we to do? First of all, understand that bullying is a problem. It's a huge public health concern, and it doesn't get the attention that it warrants, often because we, as adults, don't know how to characterize it or how to deal with it. Use appropriate functional terminology. Rather than labeling children, describe what is happening. Use verbs rather than nouns. So Destiny is being targeted on account of her size. She's then engaging in physical aggression because that is her only means of accessing social power. Some of the individuals targeting her may not fully appreciate what they're doing, and they lack power in terms of social awareness. But rather than labeling them as bullies and suggesting that this is an inherent trait within them that can't be changed, we're focusing on the behavior, what's going on. This approach takes a step back from blaming and assesses the ways in which children are trying to exercise whatever form of power they have. And it helps frame how we, as teachers and parents, respond to protect children who are vulnerable and teach appropriate social behaviors. Now, please note that I am not blaming victims for being vulnerable, and I'm not advocating that these children be sat down in a circle for conflict resolution or social skills training. I'm emphasizing that we as adults have to monitor what's happening and promote resilience. Whether that occurs separately from the bullying situation, where children receive social skills training to avoid or prevent, mitigate future bullying, that would be a great use of social skills training. Having children sit around in a circle and engage in some conflict resolution strategies when one clearly has more power, that's not an effective means of reducing or protecting children, reducing bullying or protecting children. So acknowledging that behavior can change, we can teach children to respond assertively to bullies. And bullies can be taught to be more empathetic to those around them. It's not always black and white. And when we focus on specific skills, again, with specific individuals, not as a group, not getting the bully and the victim together to focus on the types of interactions that have happened in the past, but teaching them separately how to engage in empathetic and assertive behaviors for bullies and bully victims, respectively. Then we can focus on the coercive behaviors that need to stop. We stop the bullying. And how do we do that? Well, we supervise. The number one predictor of bullying is a lack of structure or supervision. And anyone who has spent time around children knows that they can be absolute twerps. Don't get me wrong, children are magical, they're innocent, they make life worth living, but even the best behaved children make bad decisions sometimes when they are learning how to navigate their social worlds. So feedback and accountability are really crucial. Also, understand that children often won't report bullying. We have to catch it. So before they have time to come up with a cover story, the student who bullies or the student who's trying to protect the bully, we have to be observing and finding out what's going on. When we supervise in this manner, we can both anticipate the problematic interactions that, remember, are happening repetitively, and we can also better identify when a child who is being playfully teased is not enjoying that situation and is actually experiencing distress. So we become better observers of behavior, but we also catch those bullying interactions as they occur, which again, children often will not report. They don't want to be labeled as a snitch. They're scared that the bullying will worsen if that happens. They're scared that adults won't take them seriously, or that they themselves might actually get in trouble for adding to some conflict situation. And as a mother myself, I know that this has happened in my own household, where I have yelled at all of them for engaging in behaviors that were clearly precipitated and provoked by one, particularly usually one of the older ones. So what else do? We talk about bullying. Kids who know what bullying is can better identify it. They can talk about bullying if it happens to them or to others. And they need to know ways to safely stand up to bullies and how to get help. So encourage kids to speak to a trusted adult if they're bullied, or if they see other children in their environment being bullied. The adult can give comfort, support, advice, and even if they can't solve the problem directly, they can provide a validation for that child to continue reporting bullying if it happens. Now, I often encourage children to report bullying as long as it's not physically assaultive or physically abusive. Report bullying at a later time when the bully is not right there standing over them. And the reason for that is so that they're not labeled as tattling, but the teacher is still made aware and can catch the bullying in action the next time it occurs. The bully doesn't need to see you go and run to the teacher and tell, but you do have to tell. Also, we can talk about how to stand up to kids who bully. We can give tips like using humor and saying stop directly and confidently. We can talk about what to do if those actions don't work, like walking away and going to find a buddy. We can also talk about strategies for staying safe, like staying near adults or groups of other kids and avoiding those unstructured, unsupervised situations. And we can urge kids to help other students who are being bullied by showing kindness or getting help. The best strategy for preventing bullying is to build a culture of inclusion and acceptance early on, in the early elementary school years. We can also occasion positive interactions. We can encourage kids to do what they love, those special activities, extracurriculars, and hobbies that boost confidence, help kids make friends, and protect them from bullying behavior. It also helps kids build friendships so that they see each other on equal footing, and they'll be more likely to treat each other respectfully and more likely to defend one another in a potentially bullying situation. Building this buffer zone around kids means that every child in the classroom has at least one friend who's likely to have their back. Now, if your child doesn't know how to interact with other children appropriately, this is where social skills training can be really integral to his or her development. In many ways, social skills training is bullying prevention at its finest because it addresses some of those vulnerabilities that put children with disabilities at risk, while also ideally giving them the capacity to make friends and build a support system. It doesn't address the systemic issues, but it can protect your individual child, and sometimes that's what matters. On that note, people often assume that we act certain ways because that's how we feel or that's how we are, and that only children who are self-confident know how to stand up for themselves. But there's actually a lot of research suggesting it's the other way around. We can learn to be confident and assertive, but it takes practice. The more we smile, the more positive endorphins are released. The more we walk around with good posture, looking up, the more confident we feel. And even if we don't feel confident, we don't have to let our jerky peers onto that fact. Even if it's acting, if we appear cool, calm, and collected, those guys are not likely to target us. They'll choose an easier victim. The more we practice being confident and assertive in social situations, the more we start to adopt that characterization. So, just like any skill, we have to practice it until it becomes automatic, ingrained into our muscle memory. Just like you can't expect to play piano piece at your recital performance if you can't play it in your living room, you can't expect to maintain composure in a stressful, coercive bully situation if you don't practice it in other safer contexts. So, as crazy as it may seem, Psychologists actually recommend role-playing these sorts of interactions with kids. Expose them to bullying types of interactions with you in situations where they know you are acting so they can practice their skills. This type of role play sets the stage for conversations that might just lead to your child sharing events that they might not otherwise, or they might not have even realized were bullying. And for you, you can give them feedback on how their responses might be perceived and might either be diffusing or escalating a bullying situation. Next, you always want to get the team involved. Communicate with teachers and administrators about what's going on with your child, and use functional language so that they understand what is happening to whom, at least from what you know about the situation. Sometimes it's far more complex than what we realize, and the more specific and, yes, non-judgmental, even though we are feeling very judgmental of the child who is making our child's life miserable, the more effectively we can communicate. Get it in writing. So being open-minded and listening as an adult to what's happening doesn't negate the outcomes associated with bullying. So keep a record, get a commitment to act. And if it's harassment that is taking place, use that term to make sure that you're getting the attention that you need. We all hear a lot about bullying, and sometimes there are false alarms when a child claims to be victimized, but they really just weren't being allowed to win the game. This does happen, and for teachers, this is a major problem because it may happen so often that they need to hear an alarm bell loud and clear when true harassment is taking place. So get it in writing, make a plan. If your child has an IEP, get it in there, and you don't have to accept no for an answer. Make sure that protection and supervision is written into the plan. Perhaps most importantly, we can't help with situations we don't know about. So keep the lines of communication open. Listen and realize how devastating bullying can be. You may not care about what a peer is saying. It wouldn't affect you in the same way it does your child, but to your child, it might be soul-crushing. Understand that how you react to the information they're giving you directly affects how likely they are to bring you information in the future, potentially when it's more serious, more destructive, and really needs to have action taken. So in conclusion, bullying is both extremely common and extremely harmful, and a lot of bullying does not get detected because it doesn't match our stereotypes of what a traditional bully or traditional victim looks like. But we as caregivers have a lot of power to protect our kids and to promote resilience. As caregivers, we have to take bullying seriously. We need to look at bullying functionally, who is doing what, where, and why, and focus on using those verbs rather than labels for children. We need to supervise. We need to talk about bullying. We need to occasion positive interactions for our kids and practice assertiveness. And finally, we need to involve the team in creating a positive, safe school environment that values differences between individuals. Thank you so much for listening and for communicating the message that this issue is important. I hope you have a wonderful day.